Hello and welcome to today's video. This time we're going to be taking a look through my collection of vintage classic Star Trek paperbacks. So sit back, relax, and let's take a look. Okay then, so believe it or not, the Star Trek books were some of the earliest things I ever actually covered on my channel. And since then, which was over 5 years ago, my collection has vastly expanded. And I wouldn't say it's complete, but it's very, very comprehensive. And give or take a couple of books which are ferreted away in other collections, I've pretty much got all my classic Trek books out to show you today in one sort of gargantuan video. So we'll have a look. And the way I break my Star Trek books down is by publisher. So these ones are published by Ace Books there, you can see those. And Ace were a publisher that have been around for a very, very long time. And they had a bit of a history with publishing science fiction. So I guess it was only right that they did some Star Trek. This is a Star Trek catalogue. And this was dated 1979. So yes, I guess on the back of the upcoming first motion picture, I guess this is why this one came out. So yeah, a Star Trek catalogue. This one is in with my Trek books. It's related, of course. It's the authorized biography of William Shatner. Fairly easy to come across this one. It's a 70s one, yeah, late 70s again. He would later go on, of course, and do a series of very, very entertaining autobiographies, which I recommend. They are superb. Now, they published two of these. I've only got the one of them, a Star Trek Voyage to Adventure. This was a Which Way book. Now, Which Way were one of those, they were the series where you would read a paragraph like that, and then you could turn to a particular page, or you'd have an option. So like on that page there, you could go to page 67, or if you chose another direction, you'd go off to page 72. So ultimately, you would generally end up reading the book at least once all the way through. Yeah, you would. The aim of the game would be to try and make it to the end. So it's they did two in that Which Way series for Star Trek. This is one of those ones which is not the highlight of any sort of collection, but it's there all the same. It's still published by. Well, this is Archway, which I believe is a little junior imprint, the same as the Which Way books. So this is not Ace, and this is just a little quiz book. Daniel Cohen, Star Trek Lives, and this, I believe, this is from December '86. Pocket Books had the right to this one a little bit earlier, so we'll see an earlier edition. But that's the first Archway version of that one. Also with my Avons here is You and I, which is Leonard Nimoy's. I think this is a book more like of poetry. It's along the same lines as possibly you may have heard of Jonathan Livingston Seagull by Jonathan Back. Very similar sort of format. Fairly scarce, that one, that Leonard Nimoy one. Now we're on to the first of the bigger Star Trek publishers, and that's Ballantine Books with a little BB. And we start off with this one, which is absolutely one of my favourite Star Trek books of all time. It's Stephen E. Whitfield and Gene Roddenberry. Stephen Whitfield came in when they were making the third season of the original Trek, and he got unprecedented access to the sets, and he was a huge fan, and Gene Roddenberry was very keen for him to sort of put the story down into book form, and it's fantastic. One of the things I always remember in this book, and I don't know how easy it's going to be to find it, it was one of the original sketches for the Enterprise, and it is in this book. It's only like a black and white sketch. I wonder if I can just find it. No, it's not popping up easily, but it was like a prototype for the Enterprise, but it was actually what would become the Blake 7 Liberator, and I'm certain the original designer of the Liberator must have had a copy of that particular book. Now, a couple by science fiction author David Gerrold. Now, David Gerrold was most famous for writing this one, of course, The Trouble with Tribbles, one of Star Trek's most popular episodes, and he wrote the follow-up for the animated show. And these are fantastic, fantastic books. These came out in the early 1970s. They're both signed. My copies are both signed by David Gerrold. I didn't actually get to meet him. He's still around, but I've never had the chance to meet David Gerrold. But these are signed in May '73 at a convention in the States. There we are. Both very, very entertaining books about how the stories, how the Trouble with Tribbles actually came to the screen back in the day, and it was quite a torturous process that he went through, but thank goodness he stuck with it, because what a great episode Tribbles is. Susan Sackett, her name turns up on a few Star Trek related paperbacks for the original series, and this is Letters to Star Trek, which is like basically fan letters and the start of the convention scene as it was. Oh, brilliant, isn't it? Really, really good. So many of these people are gone now, of course. This is completely un-Star Trek related, except for the fact that it was written by Star Trek scriptwriter, and she wrote a couple of stories, DC Fontana. And the Questor tapes, a lot of people consider this book as a bit of a template for the character that became Mr. Data in Next Generation. And I think DC Fontana also worked on season 1 of that, maybe as a consultant. But yeah, that's why that one's in there. It is Star Trek related. Then Ballantine published the Star Trek logs. Now this is, as I said, this is by publisher, so we'll have a look at the Bantam ones in a minute, which are the numbered televisual episode adaptations. But this is they're all by Andy Foster, and he adapted the animated show. And it's like, I think it's like, is it three per book, or even 4 per book? No, 3 per book. There we are. And towards the end, a bit like James Blish, they were selling so well that Ballantine asked him to really flesh out the last couple into full-blown novels, which is exactly what Dean Foster did. But I really like these original jackets. They sort of harken back to the animated series themselves, don't they? Really, really nice look to this series. That's a bit more like it, isn't it? And there's actually 10 Star Trek logs. That's the first 6. Number 7. 8. Slight change of look now for numbers 9, but still Ballantine. And then number 10, it moves over to Ballantine Del Rey, which was Judy Del Rey, the editor. So still published under Ballantine Science Fiction. And then the last Ballantine book is one of my all-time worst Star Trek books, which is this one, Trek or Treat. And it's basically, it's an oblong book for starters, and it's basically so-called comedic sort of stills with like a funny line attached to it. Not really my cup of tea at all, so I wouldn't recommend going out of your way to find that one. But that's up to the end of Ballantine books. So now moving on to Bantam books. Now Bantam were a huge publisher in America, and they published the numbered Star Trek series. This is one of the very earliest Star Trek books, and absolutely beautiful book this. And these were written by James Blish, dedicated to Harlan Ellison, no less, January 1967. And they just go through and adapt a little handful of episodes, and very similar to what Alan Dean Foster had to do. So he adapts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in 7 like little short stories. Towards the end, they were selling so well, and they were running out of original stories to adapt, that they were brought out into almost full-length novels. But these are all the American editions. So you will find that I'm not really a fan of the British editions at all. I've got a couple in my collection, but on the whole, they're American printings. And these are all, to the best of my knowledge, American first printings. In the UK, these were published by Corgi Books. Quite a few of mine might have a UK import sticker on, but I don't mind that so much. And a few of the books I've got on my list to upgrade, but not many. On the whole, these are a pretty nice collection. But I have, as I said, covered the Star Trek books in a lot of detail previously on the channel, and you will find like separate dedicated videos like on the Star Trek logs, on these James Blish numbered books, on some of the latest series, the Fotonovels. So I will link to the dedicated Star Trek playlist at the end of this video if you do want to dive into these in a bit more detail. Here's number 8 there. So there was 12 in this series, and for a while the tail end books were being written by co-written with James Blish's wife, and he was in the UK, and he was able to get access from the BBC to go in and watch the episodes at BBC TV Centre, because there's obviously no video recorders back then, and make notes so that he could actually do the correct adaptations, which is particularly cool. It's very good of the BBC to allow him to do that. And there we are, and that was the last one, which was finished off by his partner J. Lawrence. She finished it off for him. Now we've got a little run of standalone novels and a few non-fiction books. These are all still Bantam. So this was the very first standalone Star Trek novel, and very, very good it is too. And it's very interesting to note that a lot of these novels, standalones, you realise just how popular the character of Spock was. And in a way, you could almost say he was more popular than Captain Kirk. Star Trek Lives here, which is like a bit like a fan one again, non-fiction, and Star Trek Lives. And you notice some of the artwork from the jackets has been pulled together in a little montage. Very, very cool indeed. And we've got the first of Star Trek New Voyages. So it's 8 new stories here. Introductions by the cast of Star Trek, which is super cool, keeping the series alive. These were being published after the series had finished and was just starting to go into syndication. Star Trek Messiah, Spock Messiah rather, Star Trek book. Very, very nice cover on that one. Planet of Judgment. This is by Joe Haldeman. He was running, that author was running quite high on the back of his science fiction work. So I guess they said, why don't you come and write a Star Trek book? Yeah, The Forever War. It had won the Hugo and the Nebula awards, and that was it's a bit like Starship Troopers and The Forever War. And it's a real classic of its sort. Great book. So they got some good names involved. Prize to the Phoenix here. Sondra Marshak and Mara Colbreth, which would have a follow-up. You've got the second Star Trek New Voyages, which is, as I said, more short stories. And the return of a very popular Trek character, Harry Mudd, there in Mudd's Angels. Brilliant. Really, really fantastic jacket on that one. I mean, superb. Vulcan, another one. I mean, these are almost iconic, aren't they? They really, really are. Classic early Star Trek novelizations. They are the business. And Starless World. Now, this next one's a bit of a rarity. This is the official Star Trek cooking manual. Interestingly compiled by Marianne Pickard. Just saying. From the logbook of Nurse Christine Chapel. That one's scarce. I'd say that's probably one you want to, if you ever come across it, definitely grab that one, because you don't often see that. A Trek to Mad World. You wouldn't believe how many books we got to go through today. Another one by Joe Haldeman, World Without End. Very cool. Let's move these a bit more room here. Then the second one there, the Fate of the Phoenix. And these are both highly regarded, the Phoenix novels. We've then got Devil World. Perry's Planet. Galactic Whirlpool by David Gerald, who we saw earlier on. And the last one was Death's Angel. Another very, very cool one. But that's not it from Bantam. We've still got some more to look at, but I need to make some room. So continuing the Bantam books, although this is a British Corgi edition, I've still yet to get a copy of the Bantam first book here. And this is the Star Trek Fotonovels. So this is one of the most popular episodes of all, and it's definitely in my top 5 best Star Trek stories ever. It's City on the Edge of Forever by Harlan Ellison. Fantastic time travel story. Joan Collins was the guest star. I mean, just terrific. Absolutely superb. And of course, this was long before the days of videotape. So, if you're a Star Trek fan, this was a way to relive those great adventures. And they didn't miss a beat. They're really, really nice. They've got introductions by different cast members. They've got quizzes at the end, like in conversation with Scotty there. They've got the cast list there. They've got quizzes at the end. They're a really, really great series. There's 12 of them. Once again, I've done a dedicated video on these Fotonovels, so if you are interested in them, do go and check them out. There's also Fotonovels for the first 2 movies. They're not in glorious colour like these are, which are just terrific. And they are black and white, but they're still worth having. And we'll have a look at those, obviously, a little bit later. But these are all numbered. Not too difficult to get. I would say £3 to £5 a copy. Sometimes you see sets of the 12 for about £50, which seems to be about right on these. depending on condition. But they are absolutely terrific, and I remember when these came out and I just loved them. They're all released in the UK, and I absolutely loved these to death. And in fact, they were a remainder. I remember picking them up even in the late 80s for about 25 pence each in remainder stores. So nice copies are generally out there. Another great one, favourite of mine. And the last one was Amok Time. So that ends out all the Bantam books as the publisher. Now we've got Playboy Press. This is the making of the Star Trek conventions. Little photo insert. Now, the Star Trek conventions were around, well, pretty much, I think they even started whilst the show was on air. You know, certainly there was a big fan club and fan following at that point. Now, we're going to go, and because Pocketbooks are our main publisher for Star Trek, we're going to do all the ones outside of Pocketbook, and then we're going to do them at the end in one foul swoop. So this is by Signet. This is the Star Trek quiz book. Just a little quiz book there on different episodes and that. Let's have a little look when these are published. This was June 1977 for this little fella. And then we had another series of fan-related, Star Trek-related short stories, basically. This is the Best of Trek, and the whole series of these from the magazine for Star Trek fans. And this was something that was quite a common theme. They weren't official, so they weren't licensed, these. But they were very much by the fans for the fans, really. But it was evidently Star Trek was so popular, they warranted their own series of books, and that's exactly what these are, and they're very, very nice. I'm not sure if I've got them all. I think I'm missing a couple of these. Quite tricky to find in the UK. I've had to get most of these imported from America. I've got a I've been friends with him for quite a few years now, Chris, who's a big Star Trek fan, and he and his daughter tracked down a lot of the missing ones that I was able to get. So hello to Chris if you're watching this one, and Juliet, of course. But yeah, thanks to Chris, I was able to fill a lot of holes in my gaps because I've been so fussy. I wanted the American printings, not the British ones. And I said for some of these books, they never got published in the UK to begin with, so I had to stick to the American editions. It's number 10 here. I'm missing a couple of these, but not many. 14. Really nice sort of spacey covers, but not using specifically Star Trek ships. They're being very, very careful not to tread on any copywriting toes. And then we've got this is the Best of Trek number 16, a later one, published by Rock. And then the last one I've got is the Best of Trek. The Best of Trek, there we are. And I believe there's a couple in that series as well. And then the last book before we move on to the pocket ones is this one published by Warner. It's Meaning in Star Trek by Karen Blair. And this is one of those slightly odd ones. And it was published in 1979, March 79, with that little quote by Leonard Nimoy. And you'll notice that there was a huge upsurge in books published around 78, 79, 80, pretty much leading up to when the first Star Trek the Motion Picture got released. Anyway, that's all the publishers aside from Pocket who we're now going to tackle. Okay, so before we start on the main sort of numbered series for Star Trek books, we've got these like odd bits and pieces. This is the Monsters of Star Trek, Daniel Cohen. This is Pocket, but it's also got the little arch under it, which I believe is like books in an archway, but aimed at more junior sort of readers. This is very much Pocket, like January 1980. We'll look at the Star Trek universe. Got some photos as well. But you can see there's some bigger type in that, you know, but it's pretty cool. Then we got the official trivia, official Star Trek trivia book. Now this one's a great one of my real favourite. I'd love to get a signed one of this. if I ever meet Koenig again, I'll get him to sign a copy of this because it's really nice. It's March 1980. So this is Walter Koenig's experiences on the making of Star Trek the Motion Picture. And what's most fascinating about it, because he doesn't have a massive lot to do in the first film, quite a bit more in the second, but in the first one, it's more the story of how they actually finally got round to filming it. And it's quite a torturous task, but it's really, really fascinating. Now, these are the other two Fotonovels. They do look very, very similar, don't they? These are the photo story for the motion picture and for Wrath of Khan. But the photo story, the Star Trek, the motion picture is in colour here, which is pretty cool. But the Wrath of Khan is in black and white. And I guess that may have been just to save costs. But these have got surprisingly scarce, particularly in tip-top shape, much rarer than the 70s ones. So if you come across those in nice nick, pick them up along with this one. So this is the original printing for the Klingon dictionary. You never, ever, ever see this one around. It hastily got reprinted as a B format. So this is quite a scarce one as well in first printing. December 1985, that's the one you want to be looking for. It's got this like buff cover. It's not got a glossy cover on it. And then this was the first in the numbered series, although it's not numbered number one. This was the book that launched the pocketbook Star Trek series, and it is great. It is a really, really good adaptation, as are, in fact, all the Star Trek movie adaptations. They're all really good reads. And once again, some of these you might find really tough to find. And then we go into the standalone novels now. Now, at the time, pocketbooks in the States had a science fiction imprint within pocketbooks called Timescape, and they've got that like wavy logo there. And Timescape published people like, well, they had reprints of Philip K. Dick, and a lot of the Star Trek authors had general science fiction and fantasy books published in Timescape. And in fact, I just have a look, see if there's any sort of advert for the non-Star Trek books in here or not. That there actually isn't. But we'll have a look a little bit later on in the Timescape ones and see if there's any other ones, but you'll get what I mean. But if you look up Timescape, you can generally get these early Star Trek ones quite easily. They are definitely around. So now I've definitely not read them all, but I've read an awful lot of these. It's more the tail end ones that I never got around to reading. Although, there's plenty of time still, so I get around to it. A lot of these have got beautiful covers. This is by the artist Boris, and quite often they would credit the cover artist. They don't there, but I'm sure that's a Boris cover. And he did loads for the classic Star Trek series. Now we've got the adaptation for the Wrath of Khan, using the movie poster there, Black Fire. Now, these earlier Star Trek books, up to about number 30 or so, I've gone into once again in quite depth about the authors and what was happening at the time, the editors at Pocket Books who was commissioning them in dedicated videos. So if you are looking for a bit more information about these, do check out those videos. So here we are. So there's Gene Wolfe. There's a Timescape newsletter. Maybe the list is a little bit more established by now, but certainly there's all the Star Trek ones. There certainly are people who collect Marion Zimmer Bradley. I do know of at least one collector who just collected all the Timescape books across all genres. Slight change in logo there. It's gone to the smaller size now, and we've got a silver title. And these are the little clues that show you if it's a first print or not. So I believe from now on, all the original first printings had the gold logo, and some of them later on it was gold and raised lettering. So October 83. And we will go right through now on the numbered books and the standalones and a couple of anthology series right through to the end on the pocket books in this video. This is Wounded Sky, Dan Duane, Web of the Romulans. There's a Boris one there. It's actually clearly signed, that one. Not all of them are that clear. I remember having to look some of them up when I was doing some of my videos. This is actually a second copy of Wounded Sky, and that's because this one is signed by Diane Duane, but it's a reprint. So it's a reprint which is signed, and my actual other copy of it, which is that one there, is the first. So that's a really good way of looking at it. This is the first one then with the gold title. This is the reprint, and it's just got the normal title. But as I said, I've got it in my collection because it's actually a signed one, so I didn't want to not have that as part of my run. Because, you know, getting signed Star Trek books is not that easy, particularly in the UK. Now we've got the Crystalline Confrontation, Corona. And you see, that was the last time to get one. This one is just regular pocket, the new Star Trek novel, and there we are. This is Greg Bear. He was once again a good standalone science fiction and fantasy author. It was Greg Bear. Final reflection. And when you think the age of these now, I mean, these are like 40 plus years old. They are around, and I think they represent fantastic value for money. And if you like classic Star Trek, they're brilliant fun to collect. They really, really are. Search for Spock, and generally they're around in big numbers. Got the number in there now, number 17. They are generally around in big numbers, so I would definitely think if you're beginning to contemplate collecting Star Trek novels, the way to do it is buy a few job lots to get them on your way. So this one, once again, I've got two copies. This is like a gold one, gold coloured one, which is the first from June 1984, and this one, which has got the matte finish, but it's been signed. And it's the second print from July 84. So once again, extra copy for the signature. Tears of the Singers, Melinda Snodgrass. One of my favourites, Vulcan Academy Murders. Very much remember enjoying this one when it got published. In the UK, eventually these books, I think it was about 87, 88, they started to be published by Titan Books with black spines. I am a huge non-fan of those Titan ones, although they were, a lot of the time, they were the first ones that I actually read were the Titan books before I started getting these American ones. So, you know, Titan published them in their own order, basically, but they're still, you know, it's one or the other. Personally speaking, if you want them all with a uniform shape, try and track down the American editions. That would be my suggestion, because Titan didn't publish them all, you see. So there you go. Shadow Lord. Great jacket again. Once again, you're noticing there's a lot of popular Spock action going on here. Really, really was, in a lot of ways, more popular than even Captain Kirk. Now, this next one's a bit of a, I suppose it's the only sort of rare book we'll really see today. And it goes for a few pounds. So I've got two copies of it. These are both first printings, but this one here is the regular American first print with the raised gold logo. This one is the first printing, but it's the Canadian one. It's got the little Canadian maple leaf down the bottom. Both are collectible. The book in first printing was withdrawn because it had the author, Della Van Heijs, had written in some sort of, well, some homoerotic and gay homosexual scenes into the book, and once the top dogs back at Paramount found out about it, they didn't take too kindly to that, and the book had to be edited and was reprinted, so without those things in. So if you're going to find it and you want the unexpurgated edition, you need to get it in the first printing, or go online where they are around. You can find the actual original text online without too much trouble. Dwellers in the Crucible. But yeah, that does make Killing Time one of the slightly more expensive ones to find, about 40, £50, something like that. Pawns and Symbols. On the whole, though, Star Trek is, as a series, is very, very cheap to collect, and collecting the Star Trek novels is just such great fun. I've really, really enjoyed pulling this run together. It's been one of the first things that, apart from my vintage paperbacks, that I really enjoy collecting, these Star Trek and also Doctor Who books, another where there's loads of scope and you can get a lot together quite cheaply, However, I would say the Doctor Who ones is far more expensive ones in that run than the Star Treks. Demons, James Dillard. Battle Stations. Now, you'll be pleased to hear we are about halfway through, if not a little bit more further. This is the first giant novel. Once again, an absolutely fantastic read. Von den McIntyre was one of my favourite classic Trek authors. This is a really nice, sharp copy of that one. This one, I don't think it's ever been read. Yeah, look at that, September 86. Beautiful, beautiful copy of that one. And then we got the adaptation of Star Trek 4, which I absolutely loved when it came out. Chain of Attack. See, this one here, which is pocketbook number 32, this was the first one that was released in the UK. It was Chain of Attack, and then Deep Domain was Titan Books, Star Trek number 2. So it was 1 and 2 in the Star Trek, but what about all the original ones? So this is what I mean. This is why I prefer to get the original pocket copies from the States. Right, let me make a little bit more room. Right, carrying on then, we got book 34 here, Dreams of the Raven, Carmen Carter. Now another giant one here, Strangers from the Sky. It's got the little die cut cover there, which showcases Boris's beautiful, beautiful artwork. A little bit minimalist there, but that was his way. This is a July 87. Romulan Way. Another great one. Playing up on Bones there, a Bones story. How much for Just the Planet? Bloodthirst. And another giant, Final Frontier. Yeah, look at that. Idic Epidemic, 38. Time for Yesterday. I remember that being very, very good. A.C. Crispin, of course, wrote the first big V book. Time Trap, number 40. The 3-Minute Universe. Memory Prime. Final Nexus. Vulcan's Glory. Need a better copy of that one. Double. Remember that one being particularly good. Cry of the Onleys. 46. Then we got the adaptation for Star Trek 5. This one took me ages to track down. I don't know why. I think I couldn't find the American printing. I just kept getting the British one. Kobayashi Maru, another really, really great one. I remember some of these I actually first heard them rather than read them, because there was a very, very popular line of Star Trek audiobooks read by a couple of cast members. Jimmy Doohan wrote a lot of them, read a lot of them rather. So did Walter Koenig, but so did Leonard Nimoy. They all did the odd audiobook, and they were great listens, with effects and the music and what have you, because they were authorized. So some of these, I never read the books, but I just heard the audio adaptations, which I know isn't quite the same, but those are still particularly good, and once again, fairly easy to find online. If you just want them on cassette, they get them for like £1 a tape. But I believe they have done little compilations of them now, so you can pick them up. Doctor's Orders, there we are for book number 50. Unseen Enemy. Once again, rapidly running out of room. Home is the Hunter. Ghost Walker, 53. And I think it was around this sort of time that the books stopped being published by Titan, and you could only get them as imports, And they'd moved into the realm of the specialists like comic and fantasy shops, who would bring in a lot of import science fiction. They moved to them. Jean Dewey's Legacy. Certainly, I had a shop in the early to mid 90s, and we stocked all the Star Trek books right up until when we shut in 2000. but it was around sort of 94, 95. I seem to remember the Titan ones dried up, and we had to move over to, well, we bought the books direct from Pocket Books, or Simon and Schuster was their distributor, of course. Anyway, we're a bit out of room there, so let me make a bit more space. So 57 there is The Drift. It's by Peter David. He did a few for the classic Star Trek line. Faces of Fire. And that was quite a long one. I really used to like the really long books in Star Trek because you could really get into it. And you got a little bit of sort of history of the characters that you didn't always get with the earlier books in the 60s and 70s. By this point, they were publishing a new Star Trek original series novel every month. So it was tough to keep up with them all. But some of them had obviously been worked on and commissioned long in advance. So the authors really had time to sort of get to grips, and they were producing some really great books around this time. Perhaps the covers, because they're being produced at such a rate, the covers aren't perhaps as detailed as those beautiful ones that we saw earlier on from Boris. But even so, they're still very good. And it's a nice, high-quality line. It's not all typography. They've made an effort on these, But as I said, they were coming out at such an astonishing pace. And you'd have a Star Trek book each month. You'd have maybe 6 Star Trek publications. A classic Trek book, a Next Gen, a DS9, and a Voyager, plus a non-fiction book, and possibly even a hardback. And although I've got my run of Star Trek annuals and the odd storybook and pop-up book and things like that, and I've even got one book published by Pocket, which actually isn't here. It's part of my comic book adaptations, which is in a separate collection. I mainly focused on the classic Star Trek series rather than the later ones, but the later collections will be in a future video, and I'll just cover Next Gen, DS9, and Voyager basically from the depths. But yeah, so this is when I started to get turned off a little bit by the Star Trek books, because they were coming out too quick to keep on top of it to read them all. Plus, they started to do ones which crossed over with the other series. So that month, for example, you might have to buy the books from the other series as well, just to have the full story. And then you knew full well that in 6 months' time they'd release like an omnibus edition of the full lot. Here's number 69. So we're going to be coming up to those in a minute, and you'll notice that I'm not so much of a fan of them. Here's number 70, Traitor Wins. But it is nonetheless an incredible run. I mean, there is no two ways around it. These Star Trek books are just terrific in so many ways. They really are. And I said, being numbered as well, it really isn't difficult to collect these. You can find lots of lists online where they list all the books in publication order. And I've really enjoyed pulling my runs together of these. Particularly the early ones. Very satisfying trying to find them in tip-top shape. Here's a big thick one that I never actually read, but it's got Diane Carey as well. A dinosaur on there, so maybe a time travel one. That was number 75, so that's possibly why it was a bit of a thicker one, because it was an anniversary. Captain's Daughter there, it's Captain Sulu, of course, Peter David, who I do rate as one of the best Star Trek authors. He really understood the series. Twilight's End. Ring of Tati. Torti. Now here we are. So this is actually the first one which crosses over. This is Star Trek Invasion First Strike, and it's book 1 of 4. But to get the rest of them, you'd have to buy the other books in the different series, which is really annoying. Yeah, so Next Generation book 41 was Invasion book 2. And then I think 3 and 4 came in Voyager and Deep Space Nine the following month. So yeah, that started to put me and a lot of other people off, I think. It felt like you were being milked, and they were milking you for every penny that you were worth. Maybe it's just me. And then there's book number 80, a novel by James Blish based on a story by SF author Theodore Sturgeon. Brilliant. Right, rounding out the numbered series now. So we got Mud in Your Eye, which is number 81. Obviously, the return yet again of Harry Mudd. Mind Meld. Cool. Heart of the Sun. Assignment Eternity. Greg Cox wrote that one. Now this is another three-parter. So My Brother's Keeper, Republic, book 1 of 3. And they really went mad on these sort of mini-series, didn't they? There's book 2. And there's book 3. Now they're all by the same author. What was stopping them shrinking the text and putting them into just one omnibus edition? Nothing was stopping them doing that. It was a mere cash out. They were just, taking the mick out of the fans, in my opinion. And that really, did not sit well with me and a lot of other fans, really. 88 here, across the universe. And here's another series. This is a 6-parter. This one, okay, it's a little bit different because they do have various authors contributing to the same overall story. So although it's a 6-parter, they will release them as part of the main run. So it's book 89. This is book 90. But yeah, 6-part series, this. Yeah, it would come out as a big, thick omnibus in C format, which, you think, well, why? You're just taking the mick, really, And I think they became... This is why the series, eventually wound down an awful lot. It's because they were just taking the mick too much. And there we are. That was book 6 of that one. Then we got books 3 and 4, but numbers 95 and 96 of this series. Rihansu, book 3 and book 4 by Diane Duane. And then number 97, In the Name of Honor. Now that's by an author called Dayton Ward. I actually follow him on Twitter. He's very entertaining. And I believe Dayton Ward got his break in the world of Star Trek writing with an anthology series called Strange New Worlds. And we'll have a look at those in a minute because I have brought my run of those down because I thought they'd be quite good to have a look at. Now, this is Errand of Vengeance, book 1. It's another multi-part series yet again. There's book 2. Using photograph covers now rather than art on these. So that was the Errand of Vengeance. That was a 3-parter. Then you got another one here, which is the Janus Gate. Book 1, book 2, and book 3. Like that. That number 97, by the way, is the very last one in the numbered Star Trek series. We'll make a bit more room over here. We've got some standalone books now. This is Spock's World. Now, in the UK, this is published by Pan Books. I had a real job even trying to track down the original pocket one, and mine has got a sticker on the side which will not come off, so I'm not going to attempt it. But the book itself is terrific. It's a really, really good one, that. So I recommend Spock's World by Diane Duane. Burning Dreams, and these are all standalones. These tail end ones here. Case of the Colonist's Corpse, a crime novel made to look like crime noir. And Crucible, McCoy. This is one. Well, it says it's by William Shatner, but of course, he probably, a bit like his Tech War series, he probably supplied the outline, and an actual, professional author polished it off for him. But I know he is a good writer. As I said, his autobiographies are incredibly entertaining. I really do recommend those. Gemini. This one is once again tying in with the movie Enterprise with Picard, and also by Shatner. It says. Probe. And then you've got The Return. These all came out in hardback initially before the paperback adaptation, paperback versions came along, rather. Let's just have a little look when these are dated. It's April 97. Yeah, you could say Trek was very much riding high at this point. And Harbinger in the Vanguard series. And the last one, which does lead us quite nicely into the almost the last series we're going to look at, is the A format copy of Strange New Worlds. So this was the anthology series I was mentioning. And in the end, they published 10 volumes of it. Big, big, thick books, looking at all aspects of Star Trek. And the stories could focus on one individual character. They could, focus on a planet, a bit of machinery. I think one even focuses just on like a solitary Borg or even a Tribble. Absolutely fantastic. It's a really, really imaginative series. And just as I was on the verge of going to think, I'm going to put my hat in the ring and give it a blast, they stopped it after 10 volumes, and there was a lot of talk online about whether they could come back or not, but sadly it never really happened. Maybe the actual anthologies themselves stopped selling, but we'll have a look at 1 to 10 in just a minute. I've got a couple other books to look at first though. Okay, so these last few books are actually a little bit larger format, so I pulled out the camera a little bit, and once again this is published by Wallaby, but that's also one of the more junior imprints, once again, of pocket books, and it's a look at the making of Star Trek the Motion Picture. Susan Sackett again, and once again this is a fantastic read. I couldn't believe how good this one is. Also quite scarce, so I had to really struggle to find one. I knew it existed, but it was a tough one to track down, so I recommend getting a copy of that. It's in this sort of trade format, trade paperback size, but well worth it. Star Trek Speaks, once again it's published by Wallaby, Susan Sackett, and once again just looking at more the Star Trek phenomenon rather than anything else. Another reasonably scarce one to track down, the making of Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, Alan Asherman. Got some good stuff here. Some good stuff there. Now, this is a really early one. This is back to the 60s again, so it's not paperback, but I do keep it with my paperbacks, and Pocket Books actually did a reprint of this in facsimile form, which I've not got the reprint, although it's really common, it's like £3 online. But this is the original one from the 60s. It's a Whitman TV hardback, and Mission to Horatius, and 1968. And it was designed for sort of teenagers upwards, and it's one of the very early Star Trek books. And as I said, it took me ages to find a tidy-ish copy. It's not mint, but it's definitely not bad. I got that one from the States. That's quite an early one there. This is another odd one which I picked up. This is a British one. I don't know if it ever had an American printing. Probably did. By Mark Altman, a really good book on classic Trek, and recommended this one. There's a whole slew of them, and I've got some more to show you later on in like my large format Star Trek books, but this is a particularly good one with the paperbacks. And the last one in this vein is actually published by Titan. There is one for Next Generation as well. So this is the Nitpicker's Guide for Classic Trekkers, Phil Farrand, and it's really good. So you can have this by your side as you work your way watching the original episodes. It tells you stuff to look out for, bits of trivia, little summary of the story, some of the guest stars, things like that. Very good. If anything, the Next Generation one is even better. It is even better, but this one here, I wouldn't be without it. It's an absolute top recommendation. Right, back to the pocket books now. So just before we hit the last of the Strange New Worlds, this is an example where I believe these books, called The Captain's Table, had individual volumes which are then put together into an omnibus. I do particularly like this series simply because it focused on a lot of the number twos, like the second in command, who may have gone on to become captains later on, including Commander Shelby. So yeah, quite a nice one that. So the Captain's Table, and then we go on to the Strange New Worlds anthology. So this is how they were originally published, which is the more traditional, slightly bigger than B format. I don't think this is bigger than B format, isn't it? And but not quite C format. So make of that what you will. But they are all the same format. So it's all new Star Trek adventures by the fans for the fans. As I said, looking at different aspects, and it was a competition. You would win. You would, as well as you get in your story in print in a Star Trek book, you would actually win a prize. There would be like some financial reward for these, and it really encouraged you to do your best possible work. I would have loved to have had a crack at this when they were around, but sadly that opportunity has been and gone. There's volume 5. These are surprisingly not too difficult to get, although I believe numbers 9 and 10, and maybe this is why the series stopped, are harder because they may have had smaller print runs. But the books when they came out, yeah, this was like £8.99 in the UK. I think they rose to £9.99 come the end, you know. There's number 6, that's number 7. There's number 8. They're all pretty thick books, aren't they? They're great. Slide them out of the way for books 9. And the very last one was that one, book 10. And this it did take me a bit of time to track this one down. And this last Strange New Worlds, got it off eBay in the end, I think. It was 2007. So there you go. So as it stands right now, in 2024, that is my original vintage Star Trek paperback collection. And I am really, really pleased with it. It's a fantastic run. I've taken a lot of time. It's been best part of 5 years to pull this into a proper collection, building on what I had originally. But it's been an awful lot of fun, and I've got to know quite a few people along the way. It's definitely a journey I would recommend. So if you've enjoyed today's video, do please give it that thumbs up. If you're looking for a bit more on Star Trek books in general, as I said, there is a playlist which I shall link to right now on the screen, so you can work your way through and you can see some of these other series like the Fotonovels or the Bantam books, the numbered Blish books in much, much greater detail, including some of the original stories as well, where I go into the actual detail of what was happening with the authors and the editors behind the scenes of Pocket, which in itself is quite an interesting story. If you've not already, do please hit that subscribe button for regular vintage paperback content, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon. Bye.